Welcome everyone to the Mind Game of Basketball podcast, one-on-one with yourself. Today we are very happy to welcome Coach David Blatt. So welcome, Coach.
Thank you.
Okay, like we just said in the offline, I'm not going to spend much time talking about your resume and all of your achievements. Most of the people in the world of basketball are aware of who you are and what you've done. So we are very happy and very humbled by the fact that you accepted our invitation today in the podcast. And we're looking forward to listening to many information that you're going to give us on the mental aspect of the game in basketball.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with everyone, and always very much enjoy sharing ideas with fellow coaches and colleagues in the game of basketball.
Okay, so let's start. I have actually listened to the podcast and watched it online, the one that you made about a year ago with Benes Matkevicius. Had also in my podcast previously. So I'm not gonna try to make you repeat things that you already discussed, and I'm gonna try to target other topics. Let's start with one thing: the mental health side. It's actually the most common aspect of the mental game that right now we start to develop in basketball that becomes common. We have Kevin Love, DeMar DeRozan, Ricky Rubio to talk about just the most known ones who actually started to democratize that aspect of players' feeling and what they were going through. We actually had right now same thing in Milwaukee. We have Damian Lillard saying how just the last few days, how his family wasn't here and how he was just going to work basically, but was not a player who was fully happy in his life right now outside of basketball. So my question was, do you believe that the work that we do right now is sufficient? And is there some way to prevent, for example, players to reaching such a stage into their mental health, like Ricky Rubio or Kevin Love and DeMar DeRozan, being so down that they don't find any solutions? I would like to have your take on this.
Well, first of all, I commend all of those guys that you mentioned for being courageous enough to come out and to speak on such an important subject, such a subject that has not been popular or has not been well researched or has not been in the forefront of people's or players or fans' mind as to being a part of the world of competitive sports. Like many things, with the advance in technology, with the advances in society, with the advances in the environment of the game, and of course, now we're speaking specifically of basketball, but it's almost any sport. This subject demands and requires and deserves a lot more attention, and certainly is part of the game as we know it. Thus, being a coach, it's important that we're all aware of what ways that mental health issues can impact upon your players or your teams or your organizations, and also requires from us to be educated and educate ourselves on these subjects so as to best help our players and our people in the organization to deal with some of the difficulties that the modern world of sport brings with us. Years and years ago, because it wasn't a subject that was even talked about, there was no real need or no real requirement to examine these things and to be educated about these things and to know how to deal with these things if indeed they became major issues. That is not the case today. So all of us as people and as coaches certainly should make it a point to learn and to become educated and to perhaps most importantly, take it very seriously as part of our game and part of our environment.
Okay, do you believe that it is something that we can compare to strength and conditioning, for example, in the early 2000s, like when you talk about mental health and the mental aspect of the game altogether with what you just said?
Very much so. I mean, if you look at any field, whether it be business, whether it be sport, whether it be politics, whether it be education, anything, as time goes on, these areas, they grow and they become affected by other things, and they become sources or resources for us to learn from and to take seriously as parts of what we all should be educated about and sensitive to. Your comparison to the world of strength and conditioning is right to the point. Years and years ago, certainly when I played many years ago, nobody even thought about strength and conditioning. And now it's a critical aspect in the professional sports world, in the game of basketball specifically, and has allowed athletes to grow and to improve and to meet and master their potential in the game that we all want to excel in, we all want to improve in, that we all want to succeed in. And this is just another element of the game that offers us the ability to improve or to grow, and hopefully to benefit from.
And so that's interesting, because I'm lucky to be able to talk with many people from the world of basketball who have like amazing experience, and everybody agrees on what you just say. Like everybody agrees on the fact that the mental aspect has to be developed, has to be recognized, has to be worked on, and everything. The problem is, for example, I do work on 3 different aspects of the game. There is the mental health side, and then the mental performance side specific to basketball. And then the third aspect is actually the development of basketball IQ on specific situations, where I believe we have tremendous development that's possible, potential. But as of right now, how do you believe we could give coaches an understanding of like the real asset that mental performance can have? You know what I mean? Like right now, it's like, okay, we understand it's there, but we're gonna find excuses, or we don't have the budget. For example, right now I'm in Lithuania, right? I'm working with the Players Association of Lithuania, developing the network. My wife is Lithuanian. We decided to move here. The Lithuanians, for example, right now are okay, very open-minded about working with it. But right now, when you go ask organizations to eventually develop situations, you're gonna have the 4 best teams in Lithuania this year would change their coaches. Mm-hmm. Some of them change maybe 3-4 players within their roster. So how much of their budget is impacted when you change a coach, when you change so many players, that you do not take the time to invest in that side of mental performance? Do you know what I mean? And that's just, I mean, I say it with a lot of respect, because I do respect Lithuanian basketball very highly. What I'm saying is just an example of, okay, we understand that it's there. We understand that we need to develop it. We don't really know how to yet, or with who to do it, or how to set it up. But then we're not ready to invest in there yet. So how do you believe we could give coaches a sense, and how would you, with your experience as a coach, with your role as a consultant, how would you feel would be the right approach to develop those relationships with the organizations, to open their eyes about it, and to make sure that they can benefit from it, they will benefit from it, and their lives will change the same way that it did with the strength and conditioning world?
Well, I mean, you raised a lot of points right now, and I'm trying to think of how I can give you a very good specific answer. What comes to my mind is this, that you're really talking about two different things that in essence are impacting one another. You know, if you talk about mental health as a particular subject, and then you together with that talk about mental performance, it's very easy to look at one and say, okay, this is a particular subject, and then the other is a different subject. The fact of the matter is those things are actually tied together and very closely.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, I will say this, that when people and organizations hear about mental health, it has a kind of negative connotation, a negative impression to it, and that's unfortunate, and it's very unfair, and again, that's why these guys coming out and talking openly about it is very admirable, because indeed, you know, if you really want to think about it deeply and be open to about it and be educated about it, you certainly can sell the concept to those that provide resources for the importance of making this a very integral part of your budget, or integral part of what you have to offer your teams. So I would look at it that way. I think that a lot of people believe that sports imitate life, and others believe that life imitates sport. And these subjects specifically are things that exist in our society prominently today, as opposed to 20 or 30 years ago, where no one even talked about it, no one even considered it. So, when you move forward, one of the first things that I think is critical is that people are open enough and courageous enough and educated enough to consider the value and the benefit of giving these subjects very, very particular thought, or investing resources in creating an environment which is most healthy and most beneficial to the athletes that we want to see reach their full performance, or to the teams that want to be the best that they can be. There's always a lag. There's always sort of a slow connection between new subjects and the bottom line of a team. Over time, generally what happens is that the better organizations and the better leaders or managers or owners or whatever you want to call those that are in charge of the teams, they make it a point to be aware of these things. They make it a point to get ahead of the problems, to get ahead of the issues, to get ahead of the ball, and sort of incorporate it before it becomes a bigger issue. I mean, simply, if you have a player that is having a really hard time from a mental standpoint, again, and I differentiate somewhat between mental performance and mental illness, although again, I think that there is a connection. But if you're aware of that and you want to put your people in the best possible position to succeed, which impacts on your success as a team, then you make it a point to be aware of those things, and you make it a point to educate yourself and your players, and to provide for them the resources that are necessary to deal with issues or difficulties in these areas. I think that's one of the best characteristics of great leaders, is they're ahead of the ball. They're ahead of the curve, or at the very least, they're up to speed, so to speak, on what's there and what's important. And that's why you hear this being talked about more and more today.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I completely agree with everything that you just say, because those are the situations that I actually meet on a day-to-day basis. It's true that, for example, like right now, you might have like 60% of the players that I work with. It's actually because things are not going the right way. It's not like a skill that you develop to become better. It's actually because eventually there is an issue or a beginning of an issue to start with. And again, me, I'm not a sports psychologist. I am a mental performance coach, and my job is doing the mental health is actually to prevent, like you talked about, the issue, is to make sure that we develop a regular connection with the players so that there is trust, so that we can be there for them, remind them of their standards, remind them of being holding themselves accountable for where they want to go, all those things, and making sure that there is that trustful relationship that's instilled, you know. And I believe that right now, one of the problem is, and you tell me, that's really important for me to have your point of view on that, is that some coaches, I wouldn't tell you what percentage, but some coaches have a hard time, for example, putting their ego aside and accepting that somebody else can eventually be a help like this. You know what I mean? Might not always be their fault, in the way that some people working in the mental side right now are going to be there to be there, but don't know anything about basketball. So it's hard when you have people from the outside who might be very good psychologists and know techniques, but who are not really the right ones, or not for the right people, because they don't know how to connect with them, with the language, with the situation, and similar things. But how would you feel like? What do you think about coaches having the ego of basically believing that they have to do it all, to control it all, until they give someone else a chance to basically come in and help on that mental side, you know?
Well, listen, when I look back 30 years at my own career, I didn't start the way that I finished in terms of my coaching, or in terms of my ability to maximize or help to maximize the potential of my players. Over time, if you're a good or want to be great coach, one of the things that you need to constantly do is to educate yourself and to be open to different ideas, and to be aware of changing environments, and complete yourself as a human being in a way that allows you to be the best that you can be. You know, this is something that in any field you should be willing and desirable of doing. You know, that's why I say today, still as we speak, many people they don't want to hear about mental illness impacting on performance of any kind, whether it be mental performance, or whether it be physical performance. But in truth, in the world that we live in today, this is indeed an important area that we as leaders and coaches need to be not only aware of and educated about, but willing to provide assistance to our people in order to allow them to handle the pressures of being an athlete in today's world, which are totally different than they were 30 years ago. Today, I'll give you a small example. And I actually said this in an interview about 10 years ago, and people looked at me funny, when they asked me what are the things that are changing most in basketball. And the obvious answers, of course, were the emphasis on three-point shooting, the positionless nature of the game, the various types of competitions that may be impacting during the course of the year on a player and a team. But I said, well, I think the biggest thing is the huge impact and what is perceived as importance of the media in the world of an athlete. Now, I was a professional coach, and I got to tell you that I apologize to coaches who are watching if I'm speaking from the perspective of a professional coach. But certainly today, even at the younger levels of teams, these guys are impacted on by every different stimulus that's coming from the computer they're looking at, or the phone that they're constantly holding, that are just feeding them these enormous amounts of information, and influencing the way they think, the way they feel, the way they react or respond. And the world is a very different place for athletes today than it was 20 or 30 years ago. And we, as coaches and educators, need to be aware of these things. It's not just, come to the gym, work as hard as you can, become the best that you can be. And, if you're better than the next guy, you're going to play more, or you're going to get a better job. It's not only that today.
Right. And I would
guys, because the same things that were important then are not as important now. I'm not saying that's necessarily a good thing, but that's the reality.
I agree with you. Plus, I would add the financial aspect. How right now, like, he got like tremendous, like the changes. When you talk about changes on top of what you just said, I think we can add the financial place. Even, for example, even in the NCAA, the NBA, whatever. But the place of money and how it affects, like, how do they deal with it? You have people who eventually didn't grow up with money, some of them, or not that kind of money. I know myself, some of them, and you say, like, how do you manage this situation? How do you handle it?
Yeah, that's really a good point, and an important one. You have the ability today to influence or be influenced by the media in such a way that naturally is going to impact your performance as an athlete, and in many cases, unfortunately, is also going to influence your mental health.
Right, definitely.
And this is a very serious issue.
Right. Okay, so let me get back to a thing that you said a little bit before about the fact that you were not, 30 years before the same coach. Then in the end, obviously, I would like you to try to tell me, how do you believe you manage vulnerability as a coach? That's my first question. And the second question that can go with it, it's basically, did you have an alter ego to be the coach coaching on the court and the coach who is like outside of the game, like off court?
Yeah, well, the first thing is that I think has really grown, and the importance of it has grown, is is the concept of cooperation. Today, in the world of sport, and certainly in the world of coaching, you have to be more cooperative and more open to the feelings of the people, and the feelings and needs of the people that you're working with, the people that you're trying to help advance in their careers and in their lives. I really think that personally, for a long time, I thought my growth as a coach was my ability to learn more about the principles of basketball and about the ways to do things. But the emphasis there was more on the fundamental and tactical side of the game. In today's world, of course, the very things that we're talking about are very much a part of that picture, and are very necessary for us as coaches to continue to move forward and help our people to move forward. And underestimating that, or ignoring that, or looking down on that's a terrible mistake. So if you look at it selfishly, and you want to do well, and you want to be the best that you can be, you damn sure better be aware of these things and be open to these things, and to make yourself and your group make resources accessible, whether it be time or whether it be finances, to deal with the different elements that our modern world has put into the game or into sports in general.
Okay.
By the way, I am not advocating for anyone. I'm not trying to create a market for sports psychologists or for doctors or anything else. I mean, I hope they do that. I hope they find a way to become valuable parts of organizations, because I really think that's an important issue. That's just not, that's not the reason I'm sitting here. I'm talking to you about things that are real life questions and matters that should be considered in any sports organization, or in the minds of any coaches that want to be the best that they can be and can become cooperative in a way that allows them to best aid their people and their players reach their maximum potential, or to survive, so to speak, this very, very complex world that we've all become a part of in any aspect of humanity, which is different than years ago.
Definitely. I know that in the past, I mean, I've listened to some of your interviews, and you were talking about the fact that sometimes you prefer to practice a little less, like 1 session a day instead of 2 sessions a day. And then again, I believe that we can relate to this again on the mental side, in the way that sometimes by the routine, we just go practice. We have practice sessions like several times a week, depending on the level and things. But sometimes I do believe that there would be so much work that we could do releasing, the on-course session to eventually do the mental work. Like, again, don't you believe there is potential here to help players, go back to the court fresher mentally, if we happen to find the right fit for all of them?
Sure. That's very observant of you to say that. For me, back when I began to change my practice plan and approach from 2 sessions a day to 1 session a day, certainly at a certain point during the season, that was based on my desire to keep guys physically and mentally and emotionally fresh, and simply to be more efficient in the work that was done in 1 session as opposed to 2,
right?
Or to be cognizant of the fact that guys or gals just simply needed to rest, a mental rest from even having to tie their shoes twice a day. I mean, that sounds funny, but
no, it is.
Sometimes not having to turn it on and turn it off and then turn it on and turn it off again in the same day can be really difficult. So, that was part of my thinking back then. And I'm not here to tell anybody how they should run their organization or their business. That for me just seemed to be the right thing to do. Hard work is not always determined by the amount of time or the amount of sessions of anything. It may be more determined by the quality or the efficiency or the way that you're doing things, So these are things to think about as coaches and to be aware of. Other things such as educating guys on or gals on focusing on what is important in your profession helps them perhaps to avoid some of the pitfalls that are presented by this incredible amount of information around them, or access to different stimuli that impacts on them in not always in the best way. I give you a small example. I mean, even if you were to consider um, making it a point, or if you want to call it a rule, although I don't necessarily believe in rules-based discipline. If you were to say, guys, when you come to the locker room and you walk in the locker room doors, turn your phones on. No phones. I want you to talk to each other. I don't want you to talk to your telephone. It's important for me that you're communicating on and off the court, at least in this period of time that we are together. So if I ask you to come in a day and have a weightlifting session or a conditioning or sports strength and conditioning session and a film and a talk and then a pre-game meeting and a pre-practice meeting and then a good practice followed by some type of physical recovery. But I don't want you to be on your telephone when you're doing all that. I want that period of time, instead of practicing another time during the day, I want that period of time to be dedicated and devoted to what it is that we're trying to do as a team and what you should be doing in terms of mentally strengthening yourself as an athlete. So, I mean, that's a simple suggestion.
Yeah, but
I think that we have to find a way in today's world to educate guys to really dedicate themselves to their sport, to their profession, in such a way that they're not influenced by all these other things, at least for a certain period of time each day. Because sooner or later they're going to be on their phone or they're going to be on their computer, and you can't get away from it. Okay, so let's move away from that for the period of time that we're all together. Let's be dedicated and devoted to one another, when we have that time, and then we'll give you a little more time the rest of the day to play your PlayStation or play on your phone. So that's just a small example, but I think it's important and relevant.
Well, I think that's one of my questions was going to be, how do you install a winning culture? And like you just say, like it's a small example, but I do believe that it's the addition of those examples added one to another that makes a big difference in the long run, right?
Sure, absolutely. Communicate with each other. Don't communicate in the 6-inch screen or the whatever it is that you carry around to follow yourself on multimedia. You know what I mean? Let's communicate with each other. Let's be open to each other. Let's be attentive to one another. Let's allow ourselves to immerse and to grow as athletes away from all that stuff. Let's commit to that for a certain period of time, and then the rest of the world will take over when you step outside of the gym.
Right. I have another question that goes with it for coaches, related to coaches. Might be a little complex to answer it shortly and precisely. You're just gonna give me what you feel like. I feel like often coaches do have those intentions. No matter the situation, they do have those intentions of instilling those discipline and those like targeting specific philosophies, right? To start a season. So in the preseason, you're gonna have the entire team going for it. There is no losses. Usually it's summertime, so it's pretty pleasant weather and everything. Everybody's pretty much in shape or getting in shape together. So there is not that much adversity at that time, right? The problem is for many coaches, or for some coaches, again, doesn't matter what level they're coaching at, through the season, those philosophies are starting to eventually fade. Do you know what I mean? Like they actually change in terms of how much did we really care about instilling those discipline or those examples that you were talking about earlier. So what kind of advice you could give coaches to make sure that they stick to their philosophy the entire season? Does it make sense? I know that it's pretty wide, but I do believe that you can relate to the question.
Listen, changes are part of the competitive world. Things do not necessarily go as planned, even on a daily basis. But your consistency in terms of your principles, in terms of your approach, in terms of your commitment, more so even than approach, because approach you can change somewhat, are the things that I think carry the day. I know myself that, again, and this is me, I'm not trying to say that I'm the final answer on how things should be done. I know this, my teams were always not as good in the beginning as they were in the end. And this is almost without fail. It just seemed always that my teams grew as the year went on. And these very things that you're talking about are the pratfalls, are the difficulties that you experience during the season, which either can stop your progress or even, unfortunately, force you to lose your way or your job. But I think having a very solid set of fundamentals and principles and abilities to cooperate with your teams are the things that carry the day, not only in the better times, but also in the harder times. We today in the world of sports, we are partnering more with our players than we may have in the past. And I don't want to disrespect any coaches from the past. I was one of those coaches, for a period of time, to say that their way was not a good way. But just as the world has changed, we have to change. We have to grow. We have to be open-minded and be courageous enough to adapt to the ever-changing world, which of course is reflected in many ways on the ever-changing environment of sport. So back to your original question, again, I think your basics, your fundamentals and your principles and your ability to work on those things on a consistent basis with commitment and dedication carry the day as you go forward. And your willingness to be open to make the necessary adjustments that the situation calls for. There's no perfect solution, but certainly your openness as a coach and as a human being really helps you to adapt and continue to influence your players and your teams in a positive way.
Right. I mean, I can relate to everything that you just talked about, the importance of that foundational work. It's tremendous. And it's true that some coaches along the way, like with the losses and wins and losses and the pressure eventually at some point kind of lose it, So
yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I spoke a little bit about my teams being better in the end than they were in the beginning. I always believe that, results don't lead, they follow.
I agree with you 100%.
That was my philosophy. You know what I mean? And what do they follow? They follow your way of doing things on a consistent and in a committed fashion, together with your sensitivity to the human side of things. Excuse me for interrupting.
No, I agree with you, and thank you for adding it. You see, again, like what I'm going to say right now, it's one more time not a critic about anyone, more something that I can see happening regularly. And I'm, again, enjoying the fact that you're here to talk about the coaching perspective, right? And we do see often coaches, that the relationship with the referees, it's a big one, right?
Mm-hmm.
To me, I have been coaching again, like kids and other levels. So I understand what it feels like, the frustration, about not getting the right call, not being able to find solutions, trying things out, timeouts, not managing runs, having conflict, all those we can understand. The thing is, again, on the mental aspects of the game, I do believe that coaches also have tremendous potential to develop in the way that very often I do feel like the coaches arguing with the referees, they be basically like losing their mind in the way that, to me, if you have to take a tech or if you gotta be, like expelled of the game, you gotta be in control of it. And my coach actually that I had in NCAA, Ryan Marks, actually used to throw his jacket away and get a technical foul and go on the court. That was his circus. He was playing a role. You know what I mean? But he used to play that to basically, like fire the crowd, make the players react. So when you do those things on purpose, when you are in control of it, that's one thing. The problem is many coaches actually are taken by their emotions and actually are not in control anymore and just go lose their mind with technical fouls or get expelled because they are losing their mind. You know what I mean? So I believe that coaches, I don't know how you felt you were at the time, and did you manage to play a role with the refs? Did you manage to stay in control depending on the pressure, the high level of pressure that you had to go through? Or did you believe that sometimes you realized afterwards that eventually, with a few more breaths, sitting down for a bit and taking the time to eventually, even though it goes fast, but to breathe for a minute and then go back to it, it would have helped instead of being into the fire of it?
Well, I'll tell you a quick story that sort of will give you the explanation for how I approach things. When I was a young coach, even my first or second year coaching in Israel, in Galil, the northern part of the country, I was playing in I was coaching in a supporter league game, and we're playing at home against, I think it was even against Real Madrid, a really good team. And the game starts, and we're losing, and we're down 13, 15. And I felt like the refs were just handed it to us, just weren't being fair because they were a bigger and better team on paper. And I'm just complaining and, making a scene. And the referee, and those that know the game well, his name is Betancourt. He's a famous Spanish referee, and I'll never forget this because it changed my approach to referees forever. He saw me acting out unreasonably, almost out of control, and he walked up to me and stood next to me, and very quietly he said to me, "Coach, we are not the problem." In other words, your team is playing like hell. You're not focused on the game. You're not doing your job. Maybe that's the reason you're getting your backside handed to you. And I'll never forget it. And I learned a valuable lesson. So the things that you mentioned, everybody does that at one point or another. You try to create something that will perhaps change the environment of the game or the mood of the players or the crowd. I mean, that's part of the show of competitive sport. But for a coach, to lose his way because he's not controlling his emotions, that's not a healthy thing. And I used to tell this to my players all the time. Emotion is a good thing when you use it in the right way. Manage your emotions so that they serve you, that they benefit you. Don't allow yourself to lose control and expect that necessarily a positive thing is going to result from that, because it doesn't. It affects you, it affects the game, it affects the team. So I think a coach understanding the importance of how he utilizes, controls, manages his emotions in a way that it impacts positively on the whole, on the team, is a very important thing. It really is.
Right. And I think the message that you just sent, we are not the problem from the referee standpoint.
Usually, you know, I'm not saying refs. There are times when refs do a bad job, but guess what? They're human beings too. And trust me, in my 30 years of coaching, I've seen some things where I have wondered in my mind where, you know, where the refs really being fair,
right?
And in most cases they are, and they work. You know, especially today, nowadays, it's become more and more. Everything is just so well covered and exposed, so to speak, in terms of the access of information, the openness that we have in our society and in our sport. You know, everybody sees everything nowadays. It's pretty hard to hide anything,
right?
You know, but still, you have to be respectful of the people in the game, whether it's the referee, whether it's your opponent, whether it's your own team, and try to manage your emotions in a way that allows you to do your job and to be the master of your own fate, you know. And it's a challenge. Listen, coaching is a challenge on a number of different levels, you know.
Definitely a challenge, and definitely not easy thing. And that's why my work is not to criticize anyone or anything. It's not the point. It's really about opening up how to develop that potential to like you say, you know, like be in control and be able to help your team perform as much as possible, which sometimes we lose track of when we go focus on uncontrollables like fake excuses and all those that shouldn't be in your standards, right? So I appreciate this. I mean, a really great feedback and great anecdote right here. So I hope a lot of people will be able to use it too. So, Coach, you know, when I contacted you, I wasn't sweet talking you when I was saying a half an hour. It's been about 50 minutes. So I didn't mean to be that long with you. It's, you know, a real pleasure for me.
No need to apologize. I've enjoyed every minute. More than happy to.
I appreciate it.
Again, more than happy to speak to people that care about the game and want to improve themselves and improve the world of sport that we live in, you know. So
can I just ask one more thing?
Sure.
That this time might not have completely to do with the coaching side of it. I would like you to address it to parents. I am myself a dad of two young boys who are doing their thing, but we do have parents all around the world trying to do as well as they can, because that's what parents do. They try to do as well as they can. I know your son, for the ones who don't know, Tamir, is playing in Maccabi in the EuroLeague level. I would like you to tell me what was your approach with him growing up, eventually helping him out. Were you able to help him in coaching advice? Did you give him freedom? Was it more mentorship? How are you guys developing still today? You know, I remember like we exchanged messages in the past. When you asked me if I was seeing the game in Žalgiris when they came to play in Žalgiris. So like, can you tell us a little bit of that relationship, if that's okay with you?
Well, you know, obviously, as a coach, you know, I have what to say to my son about basketball or about his performance or his activity in a team. But what I have found to be most helpful to him is to allow him to grow and to be the master of his own universe. Years ago, I stopped working with him on an individual basis so as not to disturb him and his development as a player and as a person. I think for parents, and I see this and have seen it all the time. You know, it's not an easy situation when parents are trying to impose themselves on the game or on the coach or on the fans or on the media, whatever. You know, I don't think it's a healthy thing for the kid. I don't think it's a helpful thing for a young man or a young woman in terms of their development. as an individual and as an athlete. Try as well as you can to remove yourself from being as impactful as maybe you and your heart want to be, because everybody wants to see their kid can succeed, you know, and that's natural. It's okay. But if you really want to help your child, let them be them, and hopefully before the time comes, you've given them a good set of values and a good way to approach their team and their teammates, and a respectful appreciation of their coaches and of their organizations, so that their actions will speak loudly in terms of what they are as an athlete in this competitive world of sport. Never forget that, you know, even when you think your kid is not listening to you, he or she hears everything. They are impacted by how you talk, by how you act, by how you behave, by how you approach things. So be a grown-up, be a teacher, be an educator, be an example, and help your kid in a way that makes him the best possible person and gives him the opportunity to be the best part of himself or herself. Because the game, doesn't last forever, but the human being goes on and becomes a part of this world and of this society, of their society, that they have to function in a good and in a healthy way. Be aware of that. Take that responsibility very seriously, and be accountable of your own for your own actions. It was always more important to me to share with my son the importance of doing his best and being his best, more so than how I viewed the ref or the coach or the people around him. Because at the end of the day, those aren't the things that are going to make you a better person going forward.
Right.
That's really how I see it and how I look at it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that reminder. It should be a reminder for many people that parents are here for the best of the children. So thank you for this precision. Okay, Coach. Again, I would talk for hours with you. I'm just gonna keep it that way because it's almost been an hour. Hopefully, we'll get to meet in the future around the basketball world. It'll be my pleasure. One more time. Sincerely appreciate your availability and your open mind to give us your feedback on the mental game of basketball. It was a real pleasure to discuss with you. So thank you very much.
My pleasure, and I wish all the very best and the ability to be open and to be educated on how they can help others, to help them to be the best that they can be.
Thanks. I wish you a great day and stay in touch.
Take care.
Thanks, Coach. Bye.